Sessions, they start a little early, about 9 o'clock, but that's okay. You can come out and hear the Bible talk in the morning, and love for you to be a part of that, the 13th through the 16th. Okay, this morning we're going to get into the Word, so let's say a prayer and ask the Lord to open our eyes. Father, we pray, God, that you open our eyes to everything that you have to say so that we can behold wondrous things out of your Word. In Jesus' name, amen. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And we can just pause right there and look around and watch the men squirm in their seat, right? I was actually told by somebody, you can lighten up in here this morning, because this is a tough subject. We're talking about sex, so you might as well just lighten up a little bit, okay? Get loose this morning, all right? Get loose. I was told by somebody that I'm not really a visual preacher. I don't really offer a lot of visual aid while I preach. So he just suggested, why not just go ahead and offer some visual aids for the lust sermon? And I was like, no, Earl Beasley, I will not do that. But anyway, at any rate, but I'll know who to call. Today, it is a tough subject that we're talking about. But you can endure anything for a few minutes, right? Continue reading with me, verse 29. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. Let's get something straight here, right off the bat. We're studying Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. We're calling it his Manifesto on the Mount. I did not choose this topic for us. The Lord Jesus did. Jesus thought this topic was important enough to be a part of his Sermon on the Mount. He thought it was important enough for his disciples, Christ's followers, to be pure in this area of their life, and so to be faithful to his message. We preach it. And I want to get this straight. The Bible never claims to be a G-rated book. No, it does not. In fact, I would say most of the topics covered in the Bible are not G-rated topics whatsoever. So we're not making that claim this morning, and we're not necessarily saying that this sermon is going to be G-rated this morning. Remember, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gets right down to where we live. Jesus does not make Christian spirituality this thing that's like pie in the sky in the by and by, this ethereal Gnostic thing that is going to happen on some spiritual plane that doesn't involve our bodies and doesn't involve a physical material reality. No, the Christian gospel has implications right now for where we're living in these present bodies. And the Christian gospel is that Jesus died and rose again, not just to save your soul, but he plans to redeem and resurrect your bodies. So what we do with them matters. Material, physical matters. Jesus gets right down to where we live. His lordship over our lives extends to every area of our lives. It does not stop short of any areas, including the ones we like to keep private, or the ones we consider something that good, decent people don't talk about in public. His lordship extends all the way to our sexuality. He has something to say about it. He has claims over it. There's not a single part of our existence that Jesus does not want to sanctify and make holy and use it to reflect his character. Can we see if these mics are muted behind me? I'm getting some feedback there in these monitors, and I don't know if it's coming from them or not. But sex should not be a dirty or taboo topic. Sex should not be something off limits that you can't talk about in church. Sin made sex a dirty and taboo topic. God never intended it to be a dirty topic. Your brain came to associate it that way, perhaps because, like most human beings, your first sexual experience or the first time you were awakened in that way had this mentality going on, which was not within the purview of how God designed sex. No, I didn't say the purview. I mean the purview. That's a different word, okay? Lighten up. Remember, we're going to keep it low. So what are those purposes that God had? Well, as we read about them in Genesis 1 through 2, we find that procreation was at the top of the list. God told His creation to go out, be fruitful, and multiply. That's a very good God-ordained thing that God designed sex for. But secondly, that's not all. It's also for pleasure and for the mutual enjoyment and delight of God's people enjoying this together within the bonds of marriage. If you don't believe that God designed the sexual relationship within marriage to be something that the married couple delights in and takes pleasure in, you haven't read the Song of Solomon yet. Crack that one open, baby. That's the one we used to go to when we were little kids in church, and we'd get bored and we'd start reading through the Song of Solomon so that we could snicker at what Solomon was saying about his wife. Breasts, legs, and thighs, oh my. Oh yeah, it's all in there, baby. It's all in there. You don't like it? It's biblical, okay? We get a good laugh out of it. But it's in the Bible. Because there's nothing dirty about sex within the married relationship. It is a beautiful thing. It is a holy thing. God thought of it. He designed it for us. And we bring Him glory when we're doing it in the way that He designed. Israel knew the purposes of sex long before Christ came. They understood this. They knew the rules. They knew the laws. They knew that God had designed it for a man and for a woman for life. They knew this was what God's created intent was. They knew that expressing sexuality outside of the marriage was not what God intended and was therefore sinful. They knew all these things. They knew the commandment, the seventh commandment of the 10 Commandments that says, "You shall not commit adultery." They knew all of these things. They understood them. But does that work, just knowing a rule? It's like, let me see if I can overcome lust and sexual sin. Let me see if I can get this memorized. You shall not commit adultery. Okay, I think I got it. Does it work just to know the rules? But they knew them. But yet, what do we read in the Old Testament? The Old Testament is replete with stories of sexual drama. All over the Old Testament. You'd be hard-pressed to find a narrative in the Old Testament that didn't have some kind of sexual drama in it, that expressed the brokenness of community, of Christ's humanity, that went outside the bounds of what God had said. Noah? Check. Abraham? Check. Lot? Check. David? Oh yeah. Solomon? Really, really oh yeah. You could not have made a movie about Solomon's life and keep it G-rated. Oh no, not to be faithful to his life and his multiple partners. Absolutely not. So what was going on? They knew what God had set up in the marriage relationship. They knew what God's law said. And yet, whatever it was that they knew in their head wasn't enough of a deterrent to keep them from committing sexual sin. But Jesus comes along. And we as Christians don't believe Moses fulfilled Israel's story, do we? We don't believe Abraham fulfilled Israel's story. We don't believe any of those men in the Old Testament fulfilled the Old Testament. Who do we believe fulfilled it all? Jesus. Jesus comes along and he shows us a different way. Jesus comes along and he says, you have to kill sexual sin at the root before it gets started. Because just giving you the rule, don't do it, is not enough. There has to be something inside you that changes. It starts somewhere down deep. So today we're looking at the second of 6 examples where Jesus takes the law and he gives us the deeper heart and intent of God behind the law. 6 examples he gives. The first one last week, we talked about anger. And we talked about the fact that murder doesn't just happen out of nowhere. That anger gets rooted deeply in the heart of a person. And so when Jesus gives him the 6th commandment, you shall not murder. No, I'm sorry, that's not the 6th commandment. But when Jesus gives him the commandment, you shall not murder. And then he goes on to say, but those who are angry in their heart will be liable to judgment. Well, then what does he do here today when he gives us the commandment about adultery? He says, you've heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery in his heart. And what is he trying to do? He is trying to show us that whereas the Pharisees were trying to regulate outward righteousness, Jesus was showing us that sin starts somewhere way far back there. It starts way down deeper in the heart of a person before it ever has an outward expression. In addressing lust, Jesus is showing us where sexual immorality starts. And let's talk about definitions for a second. He uses this word adultery first. Now, adultery meant then more or less what it means now. It meant that you were having sexual relations with someone who was not your spouse. But don't think for a second that Jesus is just trying to limit it to that, because where he gives the root cause, he gives the cause of lust. We understand him to mean that that is where all sexual immorality starts. So let's talk about this word lust for a second. What does this word mean? I would suggest that lust is a desire that is directed towards something that cannot be fulfilled without sin. Let me say that one more time. Lust is a desire that is directed towards something that cannot be fulfilled without sin. In other words, to put it positively, it cannot be fulfilled in a holy way. Now, listen carefully. This does not mean that the sexual desire is something that is unholy. Remember, we talked about this way back in our Humanity 3.0 series. Sin is just a distortion of something God intended for good. So God designed sex, he intended it for good, but when we are lusting after someone and pointing our desires towards someone that it could not be fulfilled in a holy way, that's when it becomes sin. But that's a good desire that was designed by God. We're just not treating it how he intended for us to treat it. I was flirting with my wife this week. And I was getting a little fresh with her, you know. And she reminded me that I was teaching on lust this morning. And I said, baby, I can't lust after you. You're my wife. I can desire you all I want to desire you. Now why? Why is that? See, because our desires for each other are holy. The expression of those desires is holy. That's not lust. That's a good desire. So, I like what Oswald Chambers says. What is lust? The impatience of desire. I must have it at once. Love can wait 7 years. Lust cannot wait 2 seconds. Now, it's important that we're careful with this. And I say this because this didn't get said when I was growing up. They talked about lust when I was growing up, but they didn't talk about this aspect of it very often. And it probably did more harm than good that they left this out. It's important to really understand what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about lust. He is not talking about a passing attraction. He is not talking about, listen carefully, young people being curious about the body of the opposite sex. Okay? If you don't understand, that is absolutely natural for an adolescent to just wonder about the body of the opposite sex. And if you take that, and I'm not saying that you leave it unchecked. I hope that you don't mishear me this morning. But if you take that and you make a young man or a young woman feel that that curiosity is the exact same as this, and I love, let me just read what R.T. France, biblical scholar, said. And you make it the same as this lust that Jesus is talking about, which R.T. France says is a deliberate harboring of desire for an illicit relationship. That's what the lust is that Jesus is talking about. If you make a young person's curiosity the same as that, I'm not saying don't bridle it. I'm not saying don't keep it in check because it can turn into lust. But if you guilt them in the same way as someone who's harboring desire for an illicit relationship, then what you're going to do is what happened to so many of my friends growing up. And what I witnessed again and again is these young boys would have these thoughts and they'd wonder and they'd be curious. They might talk about it. And then they would be made to feel that that is all one, as if they had committed adultery. You know what they did? They just kind of gave up and they said, well, my mind's so dirty, why try? And then what ended up happening is they went into debauchery. Because they had this legalistic mindset and they said, well, I've failed on this side, so I might as well go swing all the way over here. One high-profile family that thought this way in a very fundamentalist, sectarian type way of Christianity would even have their boys walking down the street. If a woman walked by wearing something that the mother disapproved of, whatever her judgment was on it, she would yell a code word out and all the boys would have to drop their head and walk like this. Now, I'm not kidding. And then the eldest of those boys was molesting the younger sisters in his family. You cannot regulate this kind of thing. This must be a thing of the heart, and it is extremely important not to guilt young people in a way that makes them feel guilty of that very sin. At the same time, you teach them with passion about the destructive power of lust. It's also important not to put the onus of this completely on women. That's something else I heard quite often growing up. If young boys are lusting, it's the girl's fault. Girls were constantly being shamed about what they were wearing. And why is it that they wanted to wear things in such a way that caused young boys to falter and to lust and so on and so forth? And nothing was said about the character of these young boys. Notice what Jesus does. In a culture that he was in, where women were expected to keep your heads covered and keep every square inch of skin covered, Jesus actually looked at the men and he put the onus on them. He expected that the men could control themselves. He didn't think that the boys were just some sort of sexual monster that just couldn't keep things under control unless the girls had their heads covered. No, he says, you can stop lust in your heart. The onus was put back on the men. Now, you know as well as I do that Christian young women don't set out in their heart to say, I want to dress seductive today. That's not how that works. If you're a Christian young woman, you don't have that in your heart. So this doesn't excuse someone who just purposefully dresses in a way to be seductive. Not at all does this excuse that. But what it does do is it puts the onus on men. That it's not your fault that they faltered over your elbow or something because they got a thing for elbows, I guess, whatever. It's not on that person, it's on the man who lusts. Sadly, it was taught a different way. It's been taught a different way for years. But now that we have our working definition, notice that he equates lust with adultery. Remember again, Jesus clarifies the intent behind the law for us. But it's interesting because the Ten Commandments come very close to this. As Jesus gives the seventh commandment, which is, you shall not commit adultery, look at the 10th commandment, which is the commandment against coveting. And in the 10th commandment, Jesus says, within coveting, you will not desire or you will not covet after your neighbor's wife. Now it's interesting, in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Septuagint, the word used there is the same word used by Jesus for lust. So I believe that the Jews should have had some sort of understanding that lust is the start of the outward action of adultery. But yet, somehow, the Pharisees still managed to have a conveniently narrow view of sexual sin and a conveniently broad view of sexual purity. Now Jesus begins again to talk about another drastic measure. And the drastic measure that he talked about last week, if you remember when we were talking about anger. If there was something broken, if there was an expression of anger between the relationship of you and someone else, and you were in worship, what drastic measure did Jesus tell you to take? He said, you leave your gift at the altar, and you go and first be reconciled to your brother and sister. Then you come back and worship. Well, Jesus talks about drastic measures again this week in this sermon. Because he says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Now let's be really clear about something here. Let's be really clear about something. You might be surprised to know that there have been Christians throughout the centuries who have actually gone so far as mutilating and amputating themselves. I don't think it's happened in a while in the church, but it happened way back there, and they thought that they should take this literally. The ones that didn't take it quite as literal, if they found that lust was a concern, they would take a vow of celibacy and they would go off to a monastery somewhere and just try to live free from the opposite sex for their whole life, thinking that that would cure them of lust. Origen, a 3rd century theologian, even went so far, this is where it's really not G-rated, so I apologize in advance, as emasculating himself, thinking that this would be the key to overcoming lust. Now, what he found is the same thing that every other Christian found who tried to beat lust in that way, is that there's no outward thing that you can do. There's no measure you can take that will keep you free from lust and desire. And yet, while Jesus' words were not to be practiced literally, the principle is literally true. No, you can't cut off enough limbs and gouge out enough eyes. But the principle is true. He's not wrong when he says it is better to enter the kingdom of heaven maimed than to go to hell with your whole body. It is better. But as John Stott says, it's not mutilation, but it's mortification that is the path to holiness that he taught. And mortification, that means death to self, or taking up the cross to follow Christ, means to reject sinful practices so resolutely that we die to them, or we put them to death. So we must ask ourselves this question: what sorts of things do we have to be amputated from in order to keep our bodies holy? What sort of things do we have to miss out on to keep our bodies holy? You don't want to be called a prude, or a fuddy-duddy, or a goody two-shoes. You don't want to be called somebody that's not up with culture or not relevant. But what sorts of art forms, music, TV, movies, do you have to amputate yourself from in order to stay whole spiritually? The principle is still true. Now we have to be very clear here. I don't get to decide for you, and you don't get to decide for me what things we must amputate from in order to stay holy. You see, that's when legalism sets in. Are you familiar with that term? Legalism? It's a term that means that I take rules that aren't in the Bible and I seek to apply them to your life because maybe I need them in my life to stay holy, and then somehow it gets put down on paper as a rule and it was never in Scripture. You can't fall into legalism because I don't get to decide for you what you need to be cut off from, and you don't get to decide for me. Now, Paul does talk in Romans 14 about the brother or sister with the weaker conscience or the weaker will. And when he talks about them, he does say that those of us within the church, within the Christian community, that we should accommodate for their weaker conscience. So there may be things that I don't watch when you're at my house. I shouldn't use the pastor as an example because now your mind's going to be like, what's he talking about? I'm talking generally here. You may have a friend that comes over to your house and there may be things that you understood that they have struggled with in the past, and you're not going to put a stumbling block in their way because they have a weaker conscience. And you don't get to decide and tell them, well, that's silly. You should just be able to watch it and it not bother you. You don't get to do that. It's not up to you. But when they go away, it's not up to them as to where your conscience with the Lord is. If you are not violating your relationship with Him. Does that make sense this morning? This is an individual thing that you must be honest with yourself and with God about. So how do we move forward on all this? Beating sexual sin has everything to do with beating lust first. That's why Jesus puts it the way He does. And beating lust has everything to do with being transformed in our deepest desires. Remember, desires cannot be changed just by your willpower. Try to will yourself not to sin. It won't work. Try to say, well, if I just try harder, I won't sin. That doesn't work. You can't will yourself not to sin. There has to be deep inner transformation that comes in you. There has to be a pleasure within you that far exceeds the pleasure, the momentary pleasure that you would get out of sexual sin. There has to be a higher love that far exceeds the love that this earth can give you. And unless that's getting down deep, notice what James 5:16 says. Bring that up, please. Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so that you may be healed. The prayer of the righteous is powerful and effective. God doesn't just want you to pray for your sins to be covered. I love the fact that James, the brother of our Lord Jesus, uses the term healed. He wants you to be healed from your sins. He wants there to be a transformation from your sins that heals you deep down inside. You say, I never really thought of my sin like a sickness. Yes, it is. It's an infectious disease. And it needs to be healed within you and overcome. And you can't do that. You don't have enough knowledge to do that. You're definitely not a medical doctor, and you're certainly not a spiritual doctor. You can't heal yourself from this disease. And this tells you one of the practical measures that you can take in trying to go forward. There are practical things you can do. None of them are good enough in and of themselves, but you can. There, James 5:16 again. You can confess your sins to one another. Do you know the joy and the blessing of having a brother or sister that you can confess to? That you can just bare your soul to and not experience judgment, but experience somebody that wants to pray with you so you can get this thing healed? Are you that kind of person in someone's life? Have you provided that for someone? And the second practical measure is that Paul actually taught that marrying was a legitimate deterrent to sexual sin. Look at what 1 Corinthians 7, verses 8 through 9 says. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried as I am. But listen to this carefully. But if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion. Now, I want you to hear me clearly. I don't believe that marriage should be something that should be entered into unadvisedly, nonchalant, and flippantly. Absolutely not. It is the most important decision of your life. Who you will marry. It should be taken very seriously. And so understand that Paul nor I am saying that in this passage, this means, well, I desire them, so I guess I better marry them. It's not what this passage is saying. It's not saying that at all. But let me say this, and this is unpopular in today's culture. Very unpopular what I'm about to say. It is folly to tell two Christian young people who are fully devoted to Jesus Christ, who are in love with Him, and they display it in the fruits of their life, who are in love with each other, are committed, and have made certain in their heart that they are to be together. It is folly to tell them that they must pass some age threshold before they get married. Now, I don't believe hardly anybody reaches that at 16. I'm just going to tell you, okay? So don't misunderstand me this morning. But I was there at 22. And Valerie was there at 21. And the world looks at Christian young people who choose to get married early and they say, well, man, you're crazy. You don't even know who you are yet in life. And they were right. I didn't know who I was. And Valerie definitely didn't know who I was because she thought I was sliced bread. The best thing since sliced bread. She didn't know who she was. He said, well, you're not fully mature yet at that age. And you haven't got your career all mapped out yet. And your career hasn't been realized. And, you got a lot of growing up to do. Absolutely right. I didn't know who I was. She didn't know who she was yet. And you know what we did? I'm so thankful that I married when I didn't know who I was yet. Because I knew one thing. I knew I loved Jesus with all my heart. And I knew I loved that girl with all my heart. And I knew enough to say, I can commit myself to her the rest of my life. And I can keep myself to her. I don't have anything else figured out, but I know that. That was settled. And you know what? We discovered our identity together. I didn't have to go off and find a career and be my own man first. No, she shaped the man that I am today. And God used our marriage to make me who I am today. And let me just say this real clearly. God used our marriage to keep me holy. Because let me tell you something. You don't get married for happiness. You get married for holiness. We were young and we were dumb. But you know what? I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I think we're disobedient to the Scripture if we tell young people that they have to have their career mapped out, that they have to be fully mature, and that everything in their life has to be together before they join together in one another to keep themselves holy. And if that's the criteria, there's a lot of 50-year-olds that don't need to be getting married either, okay? Marriage wasn't about finding myself first and then giving myself to that person. It was about finding myself with him. And we needed the Christian community. We needed older believers who would pour into our lives and would help us through things. And we've been through a lot. But we had that in our lives. And Christian young people can make it as well. But I'm going to say this in conclusion. I'm going to ask Renee to play. None of these things that I've just mentioned, not even the marriage thing, none of it is a deterrent to inner transformation. Or rather, none of it is a deterrent to lust. Only inner transformation is that for us. That only comes through falling in love with Jesus, growing in daily intimacy with Him. Don't come to me and say that you've not practiced the spiritual disciplines of prayer daily and Bible reading and neglect Christian community and only coming to church once every blue moon and hardly ever taking communion with the church body, not practicing intimacy with Jesus. Don't come to me then and say you're surprised that sexual sin and lust is a problem for you. Intimacy with Jesus is the only way out. You can beat the accountability partners. You can trick them if the desire is there. You can trick anybody. But intimacy with Jesus isn't possible without giving all of your heart to Him. And as long as you're doing that every single day, He, as your gentle shepherd, leads you out of sin. Today's message wasn't about pouring extra shame onto you because you need to feel more guilty. That's not the gospel. The gospel today is that the gentle shepherd reaches out his hand and says, it's a good day to start following me again in this area of your life. It's a good day to start following me again. I'm going to ask you to stand with me. Just close your eyes for a moment. This is to give your neighbor privacy as much as anything. Close your eyes, bow your head. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus. Oh, I'm falling in love with Jesus. It was the best thing I've ever done. Sing that with me. That's the words are simple. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus. Oh, falling in love with Jesus was the best thing I've ever done. Oh, 'cause in His arms I feel protected. Oh, in His arms never disconnected. Oh, in His arms I feel protected, and there's no place I'd rather be, 'cause I'm falling in love, falling in love, oh, with Jesus. Just let Him know today. Lift your hands, just let Him know. Oh, I'm falling in love with Jesus. Oh, I'm falling in love with Jesus, and it's the best thing I've ever done. Oh, Jesus, today fall in love with you all over again today, Jesus. We've stepped outside the path and we've left our first love over and over again. We've played the harlot. We've been the Gomer to your Hosea over and over again. But your redeeming love keeps coming and rescuing us over and over again. So we're sorry. We're sorry. And we want you back. And your voice today is not a voice of shame that's calling out to us, reminding us that we messed up again and telling us that we've sinned against you. But your voice today is one that says, come, my beloved. The winter is over. The spring has come. Take my hand and let me lead you in the ways of righteousness. Not as a threat, but as an invitation into a life that you've never known before. And so that's what Jesus is doing for you right now. He's inviting you. I want you to experience holiness because holiness is happy. Holiness is peace. Holiness is security. You don't have to wonder and hide your shame in the night. Holiness says, come into the light. Enjoy God again. How long has it been since you enjoyed God? How long has it been since you delighted in God? That's what holiness is. So, Father, just bring it about today all across this room. Every heart that's withholding, just break their wheels today, Father. Break us again. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Keep your eyes closed, your head bowed just for another moment. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. I'm not asking you to confess anything. I'm just asking you in line with what I just said at the close of this message. Are you willing in your heart to make a new commitment to daily intimacy with Jesus, which is the only way to overcome sin? Are you making that commitment? Just raise your hand. A new commitment to daily intimacy with Jesus, where He's my lover, He's mine, He's my affection, and He's my desire. Thank you so much. That's what it takes. That's what it's going to take. And you've made that commitment now. You keep that firm in your heart. Falling in love with Jesus. Falling in love with Jesus. Oh, falling in love